Trump's triumphs in 2024 U.S. election, a historic comeback victory against all odds. Trump has become the first Republican to win the nation's popular vote since 2008 George W. Bush in 2004. Despite winning the Electoral College victory in 2016, Trump lost the popular vote by about 3 million that year and by about 7 million in 2020. Forced to come to terms with his slim chances at winning in November, President Biden announced on July 21st that he would end his bid for re-election. With just over 3 months until Election Day, Biden's decision not to run for a second term turned what would have been a rematch between the two 2020 candidates into an uncertain race, leading many Democrats, including Biden himself, to show support for Vice President Kamala Harris's candidacy. She was officially named the Democratic nominee at the Democratic Convention on August 19th through 22nd. In early August, Harris announced Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for the election in November. The Republican National Convention saw the official confirmation of Donald Trump as Republican presidential nominee and J.D. Vance as his running mate. Throughout his campaign, Trump was the target of 2 assassination attempts, marking the first presidential assassination attempt in the U.S. since Ronald Reagan in 1981. Since his presidency, Trump faced numerous legal challenges, including questions about his election eligibility, 2 House impeachments, and nearly 100 criminal charges related to election interference, attempting to overturn the 2020 election results, and falsifying records. On May 30th, 2024, he was convicted on 34 felony counts for falsifying business records linked to a 2016 sex scandal. Despite being the first U.S. president to be a convicted felon, he remained eligible for re-election and maintained strong Republican support, with many viewing the charges as politically motivated. The election of the President and Vice President of the United States is an indirect election in which citizens of the United States who are registered to vote in one of the 50 U.S. states or in Washington, D.C., cast ballots not directly for those offices, but instead for members of the Electoral College. The Apportionment Act of 1929 set the framework for the allocation of electoral votes in the U.S., which remains at a total of 538 votes. These electors then cast direct votes, known as electoral votes, for president and for vice president. The candidate who receives an absolute majority of electoral votes, at least 270 out of 538, since the 23rd Amendment granted voting rights to citizens of D.C., is then elected to that office. This includes 100 senators, 2 per state, 435 House representatives, apportioned based on population, and 3 votes for the District of Columbia. For example, California has 55 electors because it has a large population, while smaller states like Wyoming have just 3 electors. The winner of the popular vote in each state generally wins all of that state's electors, except in Maine and Nebraska, where they use a slightly different system. What system do Nebraska and Maine use? Nebraska and Maine use a proportional system for the Electoral College, which is different from the winner-takes-all system used by most other states. Here's how it works. Congressional district method. Instead of awarding all electoral votes to the winner of the statewide popular vote, Nebraska and Maine divide their electoral votes between the candidates based on the results in each congressional district. Each state has 2 Senate seats, so they each have 2 electoral votes that are awarded to the candidate who wins the statewide popular vote. The remaining electoral votes, which are based on the number of congressional districts, are awarded based on who wins in each of the individual districts. For example, in Maine there are 2 Senate seats, 2 electoral votes, and 2 congressional districts, 2 more electoral votes. If a candidate wins the popular vote in one district, they get 1 electoral vote from that district, And if they win the statewide vote, they get one additional electoral vote. The same principle applies to Nebraska. Possible outcome. This method allows for more splitting of electoral votes. For instance, if a candidate wins 3 out of 5 districts, they might get 3 electoral votes, and the other candidate could win the remaining 2. The statewide vote winner would get the 2 extra electoral votes. This system allows for a more proportional allocation of electoral votes, meaning a state's vote count can reflect a closer division of support between the candidates, rather than giving all electoral votes to the winner of the state's popular vote. If no candidate receives an absolute majority of the votes for president, the House of Representatives elects the president. Likewise, if no one receives an absolute majority of the votes for vice president, then the Senate elects the vice president. Furthermore, most of the time, the winner, as determined by the Electoral College, also has received the largest part of the national popular vote. There have been 4 exceptions: 1876, 1888, 2000, and 2016, in which the Electoral College winner's portion of the popular vote was surpassed by an opponent. Although taking fewer votes, the winner claimed more Electoral College seats due to winning close and narrow pluralities in numerous swing states. Due to the winner-take-all method that most states use to determine their presidential electors, candidates often campaign only in competitive states, which is why a select group of states frequently receives a majority of the advertisements and candidate visits. The battlegrounds may change in certain election cycles and may be reflected in overall polling, demographics, and the ideological appeal of the nominees. In addition, the 1824 election was the only presidential election under the current system decided by a contingent election in Congress that elected a different president than the candidate, with a plurality in both the electoral and popular vote. The 1800 election and the 1824 election were decided in the House, which made John Quincy Adams victorious. In 1800, the House winner, Thomas Jefferson, was the candidate who had won a plurality of the popular vote. Presidential elections occur every 4 years on Election Day, which since 1845 has been the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. The Electoral College electors then formally cast their electoral votes on the first Monday after December 12th at their state's capital. Congress then certifies the results in early January, and the presidential term begins on Inauguration Day, which, since the passage of the 20th Amendment, has been set on January 20th. Until 1937, presidents were not sworn in until March 4th because it took a long time to count and report ballots, and because of the winner's logistical issues in moving to the Capitol. The 2020 U.S. Census data revealed notable shifts in population across the country, which directly influence the number of House representatives each state is entitled to. Since each representative corresponds to one electoral vote, these population changes also indirectly affect a state's electoral votes. Some states, like Texas and Florida, saw significant population increases, leading to gains in both congressional seats and electoral votes. Meanwhile, states like California and New York, which experienced slower growth or population declines, lost seats and therefore electoral votes. This shift in electoral vote allocation will have lasting implications, as the new distribution will be used in determining the outcome of U.S. presidential elections over the next 10 years. This reapportionment will not only affect how states are represented in Congress, but also how their political influence is felt on the national stage, particularly in presidential elections. This system was designed by the founders to balance the influence of both large and small states, and while it's helped elect presidents like George W. Bush in 2000 and Donald Trump in 2016, who lost the popular vote but won the Electoral College, it has also sparked debates about whether it's the best way to choose a president. Trump's campaign says he has accepted President Biden's invitation to meet at the White House to discuss the presidential transition. Less than 24 hours from when she was expected to address a waiting, jubilant crowd, Harris stood in front of the Frederick Douglass Memorial Hall at her alma mater. Gone were the throngs of Howard students hoping to see one of their own lead the country. While I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. The fight for freedom, for opportunity, for fairness, and for the dignity of all people. A fight for the ideals at the heart of our nation. The ideals that reflect an America at our best. That is a fight I will never give up, the Vice President said. Do not despair. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves, Harris told the crowd. The fight for our freedom will take hard work. But like I say, hard work is good work. Hard work can be joyful work, and the fight for our country is always worth it. World leaders rushed to congratulate Trump as votes were still being counted after early projected wins in key battleground states. Donald Trump is set to enter the White House again. In his victory speech, he indicated one of the major policy decisions he will make will likely be about working to end wars around the world. Though he did not say where, Ukraine and Israel have been cited by geopolitical experts as the likely focus of Trump 2.0. I'm not going to start wars, I'm going to stop wars, the Republican U.S. presidential nominee said in his victory speech. We had no wars. For 4 years, we had no wars. Except we defeated ISIS, Mr. Trump said.